Today we have a very, very, very exciting video. I am honored to be joined by Adam from the channel Unthink Me. He is the
Hello.
sort of YouTube residential scholar on Ken Wilber,
Yeah.
who, of course, now my subscribers know we're big on Gebser. In one of my videos, I was talking to a subscriber about the meaning of life, and he mentioned Ken Wilber. He was like, You know him, right?" And I was like, "No." And he looked surprised. He was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I think this is where they got it from." So I was like, once he said that, I just looked into him. Then, of course, I found you, and I just thought, well, you're already miles ahead of me when it comes to this integral stuff. So, Adam, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here and talking about this integral consciousness stuff.
It's my pleasure to be here. I'm fanning your channel. And hi, all of the Idols of the Cave fans out there. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You are the man. Thank you. So, we'll talk about Gebser Wilbur here. So, what is your familiarity with Gebser, and what is Wilbur's familiarity with Gebser? Does he ever mention him? Does he criticize him? Does he praise him?
The word integral theory is kind of Ken Wilber's, that's his brand, integral theory is what I do. And he got that from Gebser, that his Gebser's idea is kind of that this stage of I don't know whether he thinks personal or collective consciousness or subconscious. I don't, but the stage that the zeitgeist, let's say, is at, it goes to this integral place, which is kind of not culturally recognized. So we're in the position of defining integral, and I have the integral theory way of defining it. You probably have a more Gebserian way of defining it, but we're hoping to find a common ground here where it's like, this is what integral means. This is what we mean by the integral stage of development. Gebser has this what five-stage model: archaic, magic, mythic, mental irrational, and then
Integral.
integral, or straight to integral. The integral theory uses this model called altitudes, which is definitely derived from not just Gebser, but basically anyone who ever made a map of stages of social or individual consciousness. So Ken Wilber's whole deal with levels, stages, is he just noticed he was a scholar of all these other people. He noticed like, oh my God, whenever people make a model of how consciousness evolves or develops, they end up with a picture that looks basically like your model, like the altitudes model. The altitudes model includes more granularity. It's a little, there's more stages, but they're referring to the same territory. So our integral stage is stage 7 as opposed to 5, but it means this, it's just Kelvin and Celsius and Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it seems that the Wilbur is a little more detailed and fleshed out version of that model of Gebser's structures of consciousness. He kind of takes it a little further. I saw that when you have some really great videos just breaking down the 12, is it 12 stages of
It's
consciousness? I think it,
12 currently. I mean, even Wilbur people will dispute me
yeah,
whether it's like you go up to 9 or 8 or all the way to 12.
right.
Those last four are pretty hot debate topics, whether they exist, whether they're real stages.
Mhm.
And I don't have like a hard line on any of that. I'm participating in the dialogue about it. Now, with your actual question, so I'm not very personally familiar but I'm very, very familiar with Ken Wilber's work. Like I've read all of his books except like the last two. They're on my reading list. I do the Unthink Me thing as opposed to reading now a lot more.
Yeah.
So I really don't read as much as I talk about things that I've read now. He kind of has this idea of lines of development that are studied. Like Gebser would be a line of development, which we might call the worldview line, or whatever you would name that line, and that those show a sort of universal similarity in the developmental pattern, even though they're referring to different aspects of what you are. But worldview, if that's what we're calling Gebser in the Wilberian sense as a line, is very significant and fundamental to the person. It's a very important line. It says a lot about them and how they relate to others, how they feel about things. The only difference with the altitudes model is it's an attempt to describe all the lines simultaneously.
Yeah.
So really fuzzy, really generalized, granted, but it does have that extreme granularity. And some of the interesting stuff to talk about with us might be the differences in how what sort of theories the model leads to with greater or less granularity.
At the risk of sounding a little pedantic, when you say integral theory, I think what Gebser would say is the word theory, that belongs to 3D rational stuff. And of course, integral consciousness is trying to transcend that. Same thing with stages. That's a big point of the mental rational. Now, At the same time, Gebser has a great respect for the mental rational because that's how he explains it. In his book, he openly admits like the magic structure can't really be truly experienced unless you're there with the gongs, with the tribe chanting. So he, it's not bad. But I get a little worried with Wilbur that he's viewed integral consciousness as a spatial enrichment, which is definitely a big part of it. But I just don't hear him talk about time as an intensity that much. So I guess my question is, what is your slash understanding of time, and what is Wilbur's understanding of time? Does it align with Gebser's understanding as time as a qualitative intensity that integrates?
So I think you might need to run me through Gebser's notion of time. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, I think that would be a better starting point for
Yeah,
me to,
absolutely.
yeah.
So the key point with Gebser would say that these consciousness structures, every single one mutates from a preceding discovery. So with the magic structure, it would be nature or the world. It's externally focused. With the mythical structure, it's the soul, which would be internally focused. With the mental structure, it's perspectivity, that is, say, objectified space, which is external. And now time is an intensity for the integral structure. Time as an intensity is that necessary preceding discovery that allows true integral consciousness. Let's talk about the spatial version of time. So the spatial version of time is essentially clock time. So right now it's 12:09 p.m., let's say. It's not 12:08, it's not 12:10. Time in the spatial sense is external, it's out there, it's a continuous duration, and time units are separated from each other and divided. This is all in line with the way that the mental structure brings objects in the world into relation with each other. The mental structure was born from objectified space, perspectivity, that's external, and then time as an intensity, not as an extensity as the calendar or the clock, nothing like that. It is an intensity. So, for example, when someone says something like the moment has passed, think about the implications of that. That signals that not all moments are the same. There was a moment for speaking or silence, and that moment has passed. It's not the right time. Let's say it's September 12th, 2001, and some little logic lord, edge lord wants to come out and make a joke, and then everyone comes up to him and says, hey, it's not the time. That's not appealing to the clock or the calendar, my friend. That's appealing to in here. That's appealing to intensity, into the soul. Take chronogeneity in biology. So, this idea that continuous external biological processes, let's say autism, manifest discontinuously. So, why does autism manifest at the age of 5 in some kids and the age of 2 in other kids? There seems to be an acausal discontinuous manifestation of time. This is time as an intensity rather than an extensity. I just don't hear Wilbur talk about it too much. And like I said, it makes me worry a little bit that he views it, which many sort of former rationalists do, as just the spatial enrichment. And maybe I'm misjudging there. Does that make sense?
Why does a perspective that he might hold worry you?
Well, it's not, it worries me because I think, to be a rationalist for a second, I think the spatial enrichment aspect is like 33% of it.
Okay.
I think that's like part of it. I think time as an intensity is the key point, or at least that's what Gebser would say. I
Okay.
could be wrong.
That's making some sense. I'm getting like kind of two different themes. One is that we're looking at the pattern of developmental unfolding over time and recognizing that there is a sequence to it. Is that part of what you were saying?
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
that anything Wilbur says is wrong. I'm not denying any of that. I think it's all very valid. I just think it's valid in one respect. And I think this other respect that is also a key part of integral consciousness. But having said that, that's why I wanted to ask you because I'm not super familiar with them.
Yeah, I'm teasing
Um,
apart some of the themes here,
mhm.
and I think one of them is you're characterizing the integral perspective as having a certain relationship to time, in this case as intensity and extensity. The integral theory view would be basically that what we think time is goes through stages. So that's compatible there. Now, what is the integral stages perception of time is kind of a very specific that stage, how does it perceive or understand time? I don't know if this extrinsic, intrinsic is native to the integral stage or is one expression of it. If I were to go through the stages of time, I think that you could say that from the integral perspective, it is apparent that time is, on the physical level, is relative to the perspective of the observer. So just Einsteinian
Yeah, there
time,
you
this
go.
was shocking and horrifying to realize that like gravity, well, now we know that gravity actually like takes time to propagate. It's not instantaneous. That's so defiant of our understanding. Okay. So this is what I would call a postmodern view of the nature of time, that a result of a mental construction of an organism existing. We have a clock in us. It goes tick, 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 and it makes sequence. And now we have an instrument that does a little thing, boop, boop, every second that we have of this life. And so we have a way of like measuring and quantifying time on that, what we would call level five mental rational scale. It's clearly real and that sequence is occurring, but our perspective of it may go faster or slower. And my moment that I'm in there's no reality to this moment. Time has unfolded. All of eternity has occurred. I'm just experiencing it, like Slaughterhouse-Five style, in this little pinhole view of this present moment that I get to experience as a biological organism. So all of our views of time start from there, and we're kind of at the postmodern level deconstructing.
I think that was a really good answer. I think you got it right there with the Einstein reference. That's exactly what I'm referencing. This irrational understanding of time where it breaks the rules of the traditional, like I was explaining earlier, that external duration where it just continues and everything's continuous. That's Gebser's whole point. We have to awaken time freedom, what he calls the achronon. So instead of chronological, it's discontinuous. And it's exactly what you said. It's postmodern in the sense that it's transcending the traditional 3D rational conception because time, as Gebser would say, is an aspect of the element of intensity that constitutes the world. And if time and space, according to Einstein, are one, well, then for every spatial constitution, there must be a time constitution. Time intensifies space, and it is time free, as Gebser says. You have duration, that is one way it can manifest. It could be rhythm, it could be meter, it can be this sort of discontinuous moment, like in the psyche. It could be dream time, where everything is condensed. It could be biological time, where time experienced to a young person is qualitatively distinct than an old person would experience. That's the whole point. We have to be able to employ all these aspects of time and get out of this traditional rational three. So that was a good. I'm glad you said that because that was. I actually just released a video about the quantum stuff and how that affects time
Oh,
because that's a
cool.
key. That's a key
Fascinating stuff.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, Planck's quantum is a very very big point because that really
Yeah.
does break you out of this continuous stuff.
One thing about the model of levels is the mental stage, in our view, has kind of two substages, what we would call orange meme and green meme. The orange meme is that strictly rational, where I recognize that certain patterns work, certain patterns result in success, certain patterns result in attractiveness, in death, and that's what that orange meme is obsessed with, what we would call the right quadrants, the objective facts of reality. And so that makes sense. And then getting into green meme, that's deconstructing those previous assumptions, taking those apart. And we would still kind of put that in that mental stage. And then getting into integral, it would just be in the integral view, like reconciling all those stages and understanding them in relationship to one another,
Yep.
and in relationship to a evolutionary unfolding over time as experienced by us, time being the culprit here.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way of describing the integral aspect. It really is a beautiful thing. It kind of puts together all that rationality has divided, and I think that's very important because rationalism has gone way too far, and I think it's just really just destroying people on an individual and collective level. Which actually leads me to my next question: what do you think some of the benefits collectively and individually of awakening integral consciousness could be, particularly from a collective standpoint? Because I know the individual is kind of obvious. You kind of transcend the ego and stuff and you become spiritual. But collectively, I think there's something to really be gained here. What about you?
I would recognize, first of all, those like green meme triumphs of cultural recognition of foreign cultures, things that aren't even in my wheelhouse. So that's sort of, I still put that in the mental realm. At the integral stage, I think that what we could really look for in terms of cultural signposts of its success is that we aren't having tribal dialogues anymore. We're approaching the matter as though I am a detached witness to what is happening, and I'm emotionally responding to that because I'm a biological organism, and I'm not entrenched in any view of things. I'm just approaching it with a desire for truth and sharing and understanding and receiving, both listening and talking. The integral view is very efficient and interested in results. It is inevitably pragmatic because it's disappointed with green meme postmodernism, wherein you dialogue forever, you deconstruct forever, but you never reconstruct anything. And the dialogue doesn't result in boom, boom, boom. We've made points, they're established, it's known, the positions are out there. It's just this kind of endless squirting of emotional pus, endless, like, well, I really just feel that people should do this or that. And it's like, yeah, yeah, okay, I agree with you, and that's what you're searching for here is that we agree with one another about our emotional reality. But okay, now I have to like pave my driveway and I'm going to kill a bunch of bugs and there's a moral problem happening in my existence. What's happening on every level of everything? There's conflict, there's division, and there's competing for resources of various sorts, competing over currencies that emerge at each of these levels. And the integral view, I think, very much is embracing and re-embodying and inhabiting those lower levels as well. This is kind of what we would call cleaning up work, where we're re-owning in ourselves things that, like, say, as a green meme postmodernist, I would deny about myself, that I have like some sort of built-in bias or prejudice or just something that I was raised with, something that the media taught me, that if I were approaching this as that kind of detached witness to what is, I probably would go like, huh, I'm being a little silly. And I think as an integral expressor, I do that all the time. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a crazy person. And like, how do I be less crazy? Hey, ChatGPT, how can I be less crazy according to everyone in the world? This is more integral. Green is not as interested in that.
Yeah.
They're more interested in just, I don't even get what's going on. This is a chaotic mystery that we're in. And somehow, if we all just like get to the core of ourself in our like interpersonal therapy, we might come out with this like, I don't know, it's kind of goalless actually. I don't know that they're trying to come out with anything. It's almost desperate. So the green meme that we see is kind of sickly, I would say. It's kind of naive, maybe, and it hasn't really ever had an environment to thrive in and become a like fully healthy and mature version of itself. So a lot
Yeah.
of, especially what we see expressed in our social media and in the media, is this kind of perverse, ridiculous caricature of existential postmodern consciousness. It's a cartoon version of it, and then we respond against that. It's ridiculous. We don't like it.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I think what at the very end, I think what you're gesturing at, what Gebser would say with integral consciousness, what it's doing exactly that, integrating. So instead of just the mental structure, which is now deficient, it's bringing back the magic and mythical structures. But of course, as you mentioned, because we're non-consciously aware of this, it's all deficient, and that's why integral consciousness has been. I think postmodernity is deficient integral consciousness. I think it is
Sure. Yeah, that's
indirectly
good. Yeah.
a manifestation of integral consciousness, but it does it, in my opinion, the dumbest way possible. It doesn't do it from like a quantum logic perspective, transcendental logic. It does from this stupid social construct stuff. And kind of like you said too, it just does to burn everything to the ground and then just walk away. It's one thing to burn everything to the ground and then build something better. That seems to be what Gebser, maybe Wilbur's trying to do to an extent, but that's not what the postmodernists do. It, and like you said, it's this very childish. The mythical structure is big on the soul. So if that comes back, people aren't going to be dealing with it, like you said, in an intelligent way where they're doing this existential spiritual stuff. They're doing this very childish, just kind of going off their feelings like an 8-year old. It's ridiculous. The point about the non-Western cultures too, I think that was very important. That was a big, like when I read Gebser and he made very clear what the ego was, and I started to detach myself from it a little bit. I realized this was also happening to the West. The West is really just lost in their ego. We are the best. We know what's best. We will supplant your thousands of years of culture because it doesn't make sense to us. It's very simple. So yeah, I think those are really great points as far as the integral from a collective basis. I also think just from like you were talking about the divide, the healing divide. Once you recognize that the dualistic antithetical framing of subject object is or isn't true or false, once you realize that's a projection of the ego, you start to see through it and see the whole that was always there. And I think that's an important thing. I think if more people, especially on like a political level, could see that, we would cool down the temperature of attacks a little bit because we wouldn't be attacking a separate group. We'd be attacking a part of ourselves. You know what I mean? So when a left attacks a right, they wouldn't be attacking an enemy. They'd be attacking themselves, and same thing vice versa, of course. And I think it would sort of help us realize like, hey, we're on the same team here a little bit. We're all part of the same whole. And I think that would be important. But Who knows if that's actually going to happen the way it's going? I don't think so.
I think that we're in a scary time because, according to these sort of stage theories, the explosion, like when a movement happens, a revolution, not in the political sense, but just in a revolution in paradigm occurs, there's usually a lot of kind of intensity of various sorts, and I think that we're really seeing that now. I don't know how much Gebser is influenced by like Hegel, but this dialectic kind of pendulum swinging and what Buddhists would call a middle path, which is like, okay, there's a lot of wisdom to that extreme. There's a lot of wisdom to that extreme, but probably reality is like a lot of wisdom, like right in the middle of those in some way, shape, or form. We kind of conceptualize the pendulum swing or the developmental unfolding as a spiral or as a moving back and forth kind of motion as a matter of health in the mental sense, health in the social sense. So a healthier postmodern, yeah, that would kind of be a teal integral. It would, if it were just brought to full health and awareness of itself. But it is sort of a reaction against really, really strong forces. Zealotry is really common in these like explosions, these it comes out in a sickly form. Children are childish. Yeah, I think it's a very plausible theory that the integral consciousness is more or less a healthy or mature version of the postmodern existential consciousness. I think that's really a reasonable position, and health being embracing this worldview line as well as other lines. We kind of distinguish in that integral stage, two stages, teal and turquoise. Teal we might call integral, turquoise we might call holistic, or also like super integral, something like that. In my own view, and from what I've seen developmentally in the world, level 7 teal integral is obsessed with the stages, the development, the evolution of ideas, and the collective consciousness. Level 8 kind of brings in all the other ingredients or facets that kind of contribute to your experience of consciousness. So there's kind of more dimensions that are all suggested at the level 7 view, but the level 8 view kind of systematizes them or really like locks them down in some way, shape, or form. And Ken Wilber's model is one particular way, one particular approach. It's just kind of a tool set. It's like, hey, is this the one? Like, check it out and see if it works. And it doesn't have a lot of real competitors in that sense of being that like total system of like reality as consciousness. Here's a map of it. Here's all the features that you might experience as a human being experiencing.
Yeah, that's the great thing about Wilbur and Gebser. It's not that literally every claim they make is correct. It's just they got the ball rolling, right? They're clearly onto something. It might not be everything, but there's something there. And yeah, as far as the postmodernism and the integral stuff, I feel like that's what they're doing. I mean, when they say something like, or when they say a woman's not a woman, let's say, and maybe a woman is a mythical goddess from some ancient thing, what are they really doing? They're engaging in, I think, at least to my understanding, quantum logic. This idea that consciousness with the quantum stuff is the decisive factor in conferring certainty on the ontology of whatever it is. So if I have a dryer downstairs and it makes noise, well, I perceive it as exactly that, a dryer, not a hunk of metal, not a heat source, not an extension of the floor, a separate individual thing as a dryer. And I feel like that's what they're doing. They're trying, but they make the mistake because I think they're psychologically disturbed. We'll put it that way. So I don't think they're trying to do it from a perspective of helping people. Like they just kind of burn everything to rubble and then there you go. So they just say everything's a social construct, but that's not true. Watch. I know the desk exists. It's not socially constructed at all. So yeah, it's interesting to think about.
There might be stuff occurring in this physical universe that we just don't have the apparatus to comprehend what it is or to measure it or it just doesn't hit our sensory organism like it's not relevant to us, but it might exist. There's kind of a theory of dark matter or dark energy that would suggest that it's something of this nature. It's just something that doesn't really make an impression on our consciousness. There may be things that are just invisible to us at any stage or from any perspective. There might just be things that are invisible to us. What these extreme postmodern, I think when you characterize postmodernists, you're really talking about extreme
Yeah,
postmodernists.
the Foucault types, those kind of
Yeah.
guys.
And
Yeah.
they get to this really ridiculous place. Yeah, I think you might say disturbed, but I think it's a lot of intensity being like, delivered back in their case. It's a defensive energy. And yeah, it results in some morally and philosophically ridiculous claims. But I think that's just kind of because if you have an idea, someone will wear it to the utmost extent and someone will take it to absolutes. I mean, clearly with postmodern, it really shouldn't be taken to absolutes because the point is just to understand I guess from an integral perspective, reality is the relationship between my subjective construction and some objective reality that I don't actually know.
Hmm.
So reality as I experience it or as we experience it is a relationship between my hallucinations and what's really occurring that relates to me, that is relevant to me. And there might be things that don't seem relevant to me that still affect me, or there might be things that I have a mental idea of, and my mental idea works, but it's not correct, like the Newtonian view
Yep.
of physics. It's you would almost suspect that it's absolutely correct until you get into really weird places of like, what do suns do?
Yeah.
Like it didn't really matter. Like, what does a football do? Perfect. But what does a black hole do? Not so good anymore because
Yeah.
we're dealing with extremes and absolutes of nature in that case. And then we find that the rules get really, really peculiar and we don't really understand them yet.
Yeah, they're irrational. That's the whole point, Gebser. They're without rationality because rationality is a projection by the ego. So if it doesn't work, toss it out, right? But the rationalists say no. If it doesn't work, I'm going to use it anyways.
See, like when you say that rationality is a projection of the ego, I think that that's a postmodern statement. Like that's a healthy
Yeah.
postmodern. Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just making sure when you often say postmodern and you're kind of referring to that extreme position. So yeah, the Foucault.
Well, what is the? I don't know. I mean, maybe I admit I'm not a philosophy student, but I think the extreme version is just the normal version, insofar as it has had such a disproportionate effect to whatever healthy version there. I don't even know if there is a health. I know Gebser is a healthy version, but he doesn't consider himself a postmodernist. You know what I mean? He might call him something else and do be working with the same thing. But as far as like the Derrida, Foucault, again, they are working with like this idea that they're loosening up the set objective rationalist stuff, right? But I think they do it in such a way just to burn things down that that's why I say it's deficient integral rather than efficient integral because Gebser is pretty much doing the same thing, but he's doing it from the perspective of trying to help people, trying to reconstruct something better. Whereas the Foucault and Derridas of the world, they're just trying to, in my opinion at least, they're just trying to burn stuff down.
So
It's just,
with this stage view, we have the potential for a wolf in sheep's clothing phenomenon where maybe followers or the school of thought influenced by Foucault and Derrida might be actually mythological consciousness
mhm.
pretending to be existential or postmodern consciousness. And I think that this is what you're reacting against. This is why it's
Yes.
all so absurd and silly and stupid, is because yeah, you're getting these like fake versions of it that are childish depictions that don't
Yeah,
actually really understand how you arrive at these
exactly.
claims via an
They're not
exhaustive.
transcending to irrationality, they're regressing to irrationality, which
Yeah,
is what
regression.
most anti-rationalists do. This is why integral is so important because you need to offer them a way forward rather than just going backwards into just this irrational nonsense.
I think it is a developmental stage that, like, yeah, like, so you can express postmodernism in a healthy way, but if you kind of get stuck there or locked into it, or you start kind of subsuming all the lower levels into that level, that gets creepy. And this is the recognized in integral theory, we recognize that as like the problem
Yeah.
today is that the tech base is now green meme. This civilization is not green meme. And so, like all this communication, what is the point? It's communication and influence. That's the currency of green meme
Yeah.
postmodern world.
Yeah.
And that's what the internet is. That's what internet tech is. So our goal is like influence. And so we tend to respond to these really legend and myth versions of views and philosophies. And I just think it's important as this dialogue, continues between various perspectives approaching integral that we recognize that there is the mental construction of reality that occurs, and there's also this like exaggerated version where we're claiming that the fact of having a vagina is mythological, right?
Yeah.
Because it's that part we have a consensus, or we thought we had a consensus that like a vagina is this thing that really means a lot about whether you're male or female.
Yeah.
It's a really important determiner of that.
It was the objective sign to signal that this was a woman, right? But now that we're rejecting, here's the problem. This is what I try to make a big point. I have a whole playlist about killing rationalism. I always make this point. You want to kill rationalism, not rationality.
Right. Okay.
Because you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because that's
Yeah.
regressing. That's going backwards into deficient, irrational nonsense. That you might as well not even bother killing rationalism at that point, because at least we can amuse ourselves to death. With their irrationality, yeah, you'd be psychologically content for the 15 minutes. You were almost literally you were alive because we wouldn't have this life-saving technology from birth and stuff. You can loosen up the objectivity of rationality without throwing out its efficient stuff. There's a lot of great stuff when it comes to rationality, and that's why we transcend, go forward, and include it into something greater rather than regress and go backwards. I think that's a big point of agreement that I think we have as integral structure.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of what like Ken Wilber like ripped off, is
Yeah.
is that transcend and include notion, that's central to the integral view is transcend and include. Yeah.